Hello everyone! A while back, I did a video detailing 10 ways why Gobots were better than Transformers, and to anyone who knows me and knows my channel, knows I'm being kind of facetious. I'm not really serious when I say Gobots was better. Look at this channel. Obviously Transformers, I feel, are superior. But you'd be amazed at how many people took that video so seriously, like viciously attacked based on an opinion they might disagree with, but there's no reason to be offensive or even aggressive about it. It's just, you know, it's just a thing. And really, it's not my own opinion, but it is 10 ways where, yes, there's some things GoBots actually did handle a little bit better or had a little bit of an edge on the Transformers. Nevertheless, the reaction amused me because for some fans, there is still this constant war. The GoBots or the Transformers, you're not allowed to play the middle. Pick your side, stand your ground, and start shooting at the other side as fast as you can. It's all toys. It's ridiculous. And guess what? We're the only ones who feel that way. It's just the collectors. The people who made the series don't care. The people who performed in the series don't care. No. So today, I'm going to show you a list of voice actors who portrayed both Transformers and GoBots characters. Now, before we begin this, I will point out, there are actually a lot more than there are on this list. However, usually their involvement in one show or the other came down to, on one side or the other, they were just additional voices. Someone brought in just to fill random crowd noise or be a one-off nameless character, someone that the Renegades would beat up that week or something just to look like bad guys, that kind of thing. So there's a ton more that just aren't that noteworthy. But what I also found was that there was writers, producers, even like sound engineers who worked on both shows, which I think is kind of interesting. But we're gonna focus on voice actors with notable characters. All right, so and that doesn't we can't really start anywhere else than Frank Welker, who was both Megatron and Scooter. This is the most famous example of this like correlation between the two shows because it's two main characters who were in nearly every episode till season 3. Sorry, well, yeah, I guess it's just Galvatron then, right? But yeah, an actor who is in almost every episode of both shows, and it's not just that. It's the massive discrepancy between the two characters and the two voices. To hear them side by side, if your ear is not trained to spot Frank Welker, you would not know it's the same guy behind both voices. And the personalities between the two could not be more different. And now that's a writing thing, but it comes across in the character's portrayal. So it's also important to the voice acting of the character. I love voice acting. I have such respect for the art of voice acting because of things like this. Because this is so drastic of a difference between the two. And the man is so good at delivering both. Now, because it's Frank Welker, this is hardly the end of it. Go check his IMDb pages yourself. Spend about 6 hours scrolling through all of his credits before you get down to the 80s. And it's a marvel how many Transformers he played, and he played several GoBots characters as well. He's just that good. If you're having a debate over the greatest voice actor of all time, and your debate does not end with either Frank Welker or Mel Blanc, God, I almost blanked on Mel Blanc. Frank Welker or Mel Blanc, those are the only two acceptable answers. If that is not what your debate comes down to, you don't follow voice acting like you think you do. Period. But that's just the most notable example. Now, obviously, if we're going to talk about, Frank Welker, we got to talk about Peter Cullen as well, who portrays Optimus Prime, obviously. But he also played the renegade Gobot Tank. Yes, Tank. There's no pun. There's no play on words. Just Tank. You'll never guess what he transforms into. Once again, Peter is a fantastic voice actor. He portrayed multiple Transformers, most notably Ironhide as well, but he also portrayed more than one Gobot character, also playing the monster Gobot Pincher. So he does have, like Frank, not quite as like prolific, but he does have multiple credits that I could have gone here. I kind of go with Tank just because the standard Gobots are a little bit more prominent, and that's going to be kind of a theme to some of these, is that I'm kind of going with the more prominent roles, or at least the ones that I think are the most interesting when you see the two contrasted against each other. We're going to see a few more of those as we go. So let's see who we got up next. We have Arthur Burghardt. Now, we know him as Devastator. So, of course, like this big, booming, ominous voice. But I wanted to do the flip side, where a major Gobot character had something more of a side character in Transformers. I think that's kind of a fair thing to balance out Peter Cullen. So, of course, Arthur here played Turbo. Once again, a primary character. You imagine the VA sessions where these guys, Optimus and Megatron and Defensor, are all just like in the same scene, and then the next day they go off to another studio and they're playing all these GoBots instead. Once again, I love this industry. I love this art form. So yeah, very prominent, very prominent. Now, these two is not such, there's not so much a chameleon act between these two. I think if you put Devastator and Turbo's voices next to each other, you'd be able to tell. I think you'd be able to tell that one a little bit more. So, going forward, we're going to get into some pretty small characters here. Just to give you a warning, I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about them, but it does qualify, and I want to show you how far this goes. Paul Eiding, another fantastic, prolific voice actor who's done a million things. We know him as G1 Perceptor. He was also the monster Gobot Scorp. Scorp himself, I don't recall too much personality to the guy. A lot of the monster ones I don't really remember too vividly outside of just mean and vicious looking compared to your standard Gobot. And it kind of by intention because of the way the show was written and the toys they had to adapt, of course. But yeah, again, it's a pretty stark contrast between the Autobot scientist and the monstrous renegade. I kind of like that. We can continue on here. Dick Gautier. We know him as Prowl, the traditional Autobot security officer, and usually a prick. And then we have Skyjack, which I think is like the only name on this list. One of the few Gobot names that I think has also been used on a Transformer. Don't quote me on that. Just like something in the back of my head says, there's a Skyjack, right? Yeah, I think there's a Skyjack. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Skyjack is a pretty minor Gobot character. He does not have very many appearances, especially compared to Prowl. And he's also, again, villains in these shows tend to not have a whole lot of personality to them. They exist so the good guys can beat them up. So yeah, he's just kind of like a hotshot punk type. Apparently, that's, from what I've read, that's a trope amongst Gobot jets. But I digress. We can add one to the list. Continuing on, we need to go even more minor now. So this is Michael Bell. He was the voice of Scrapper. So hey, look, more Constructicon love. But he was also Granite from the Gobots versus the Rock Lords movie. Okay, so we're going into Rock Lord territory now. Technically still Gobot, still technically Machine Robo. So okay, give me credit here. This is still in the same continuity, still in the same spirit of this one. You know what I love about this list so far? Have you noticed the weird thing about this list? So far, everyone that I have showed you has been a good guy in one series and a bad guy in the other. Optimus Prime plays an Autobot and a Renegade, right? Michael Bell here plays, a Decepticon and one of the heroic Rock Lords. It's interesting to me just as I was putting this list together, like that kind of struck me as like, wow, like that almost feels intentional. I can tell it's not, but it almost feels that way. We can break that streak, though. We can break that streak. This is Philip Clark. I'm sorry. I rearranged my notes. I apologize. This is Alan Oppenheimer. How did I get that wrong? It's been a long day. We're looking at Alan Oppenheimer, Beachcomber, and Night Ranger. Beautiful, right? So, aside from the fact that like these two weirdly have the same color scheme going on, we finally have like both the good guys. So like Beachcomber's on Autobot, and then we have a Guardian on the other side with Night Ranger, who I believe is named after a popular 80s band, specifically to counter how weird his robot mode looks. With the shades and his like stature, he looks like he's trying really hard to be cool when you're trying to ignore the fact that he has a wheel for a crotch. In the realm of transforming robots, one of the classic villains of the 80s, Skeletor, ends up being two pretty chill good guys. I love the irony of it. And again, I love the chameleon act of voice acting. All right, let's go to where I intended to go before. This is Philip Clark. So we know him in G1 as Dead End, and in GoBots he was Dr. Go. So you have like a James Bond play there. Now in the toy line, his name is Herr Fiend, but Dr. Go was apparently a working name that just stuck. And now, like, because that was his name in the cartoons, similar to Rumble and Frenzy Fiasco, that's just kind of the name that is stuck. Either way, he actually puts on a much more memorable presence as Dr. Go than he does as Dead End. Dead End is just kind of this, like, depressing stunticon, and because he's part of a combiner group, he rarely gets a chance to really, like, stand out and present character. Dr. Go is just a mad scientist of the Renegades. High-strung, arrogant, German accent. He's very much mad scientist stereotypes of a cartoon. But that does make him fun, if anything. So he plays a more interesting role in the GoBots than he ended up doing in Transformers, which is just how that goes sometimes. We can continue. Now, from here on out, I got to show you a few human characters. So, okay, sorry, we've run out of robots at this point, but don't worry, we're still gonna finish strong here. So, Peter Renaday was Grapple in G1, and in GoBots he was Master Renegade, the one who started the entire Renegade revolt. Now, he plays as an alternate antagonist to Psykill in a few appearances, and he's the guy controlling the monster renegades. So he does present his own level of menace, as well as adding to the lore of the GoBots a little bit. You know how in Transformers, the G1 cartoon, we never really knew who started, like the specific one who started the Decepticon movement and said, okay, we need to go to war now. But in GoBots we do, which is a little bit interesting. And again, polar opposite characters. Love that. Talk about prolific voice actors, right? Rob Paulson. We know him as Slingshot, super arrogant aerial bot, but we also have him as Billy, a scientist that is a friend of Scooter's in GoBots. Again, not a whole lot to say about this, but I do love Rob Paulson. I love so many of the roles that he has done over the years, from Animaniacs to Ninja Turtles and a million other things I can't list here because the man just does way too many good roles. But again, he features in both of our favorite 80s franchises. Favorite 80s franchises about giant robots, unless you liked Robot Jocks. That's a different argument. Let's move on. Jack Angel. We have both Ultra Magnus and Dr. Aeolus. There's a lot of scientists and doctors. That's what I learned in this one, is that there's a lot of scientists and doctors that are either captured or manipulated by renegades for the plot of the week. But again, one more to the list. Now, again, I don't have much to say about this. Now, obviously, Jack Angel's done a ton in Transformers. He's Astro Train as well. Not a whole lot in GoBots, but it counts for the list, so we're going to give it to him. And then we have Dan Gilbisson. Oh my God, even our precious little Bumblebee. Even our precious little Bumblebee went to the other side. So the one you see on the right is Captain Hanrahan. Sorry. So Captain Hanrahan. And yes, he is African American. Or at least dark skinned. It was the 80s. We didn't really think about that at the time. Well, at least producers didn't think about that at the time. So it does get weird. Now, for as far as like prominent voice actors or notable names or characters, that's pretty much where it ends. You've seen the bulk. Outside of characters are just like additional voices. But I do want to end off on the most fun note about these kind of crossovers. Once again, we have to talk about the Rock Lords for that. And when we do, we have to talk about Sticks and Stones, because Sticks and Stones was portrayed by both Frank Welker and Peter Cullen. Again, I don't know if that was intentional casting, but it's hilarious casting. And again, the kind of thing that makes me love and respect this industry so much. So there is your history lesson today on the crossovers of GoBots and Transformers performers. Keep in mind, in the 80s, there was no real war. Like, even as kids, you would pretty much just buy whichever one you could afford or whichever one you thought looked cool. You know, I had Transformers and GoBots. You know, it was just a thing. And since then, I've had many transforming robots. But we didn't really have like a prejudice against it. It wasn't like Nintendo versus Genesis. You had one or the other. It wasn't like that. And it wasn't like that to anyone working on it. They just did the best they could with the materials that they were given, and they hoped for the best. It just so happened that Transformers was the one that took off. So keep that in mind. Let's not take it all seriously, because there's a lot of people who love them both, including the people who got paid by both of them. Thank you for watching. I hope I'll see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.